I'm going to be checking my phone a lot during this, which is not because I'm checking my text messages or anything. Just want to establish that timing is super important, and I'm going to time box us very strongly. And so that's why I'm looking at my phone periodically throughout this. Thanks, Halsey, for the intro. The intro on the page is literally snagged right from my syllabus, which is why it's, or not my syllabus, my resume, which is like why it's so formal. But I teach here now, which is really exciting, but also I am the co-founder of a business. We run professional developments for teams very much like this, that actually the professional developments draw tools from the disciplines of design thinking, which is my background, and my co-founder's background is in improv comedy. And so we merge those two worlds and help people use tools from those disciplines to collaborate better and meet more efficiently and get things done. So what I wanted to do today, or what we wanted to do today, really, this is a collaborative effort, is we are trying to improve how we as a PLC collaborate with each other. And the specific problem statement that we were going to focus on, or the specific genre of collaboration that we're going to focus on today, is the classroom observation. And so we want to make the classroom observation process more collaborative, basically. So let me actually give you, Halsey, I'm going to be like right behind you. I'm just going to write on the board just a tiny bit. A lot of what I'm doing today is going to be not me talking, but basically I just wanted to give you like a super brief overview of, like, from an academic perspective of what design thinking is. Design thinking is from the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University, better known as the D School, which is where I got my training. And then it was popularized by IDEO.com, if you're familiar with that company. But design thinking is a creative problem-solving methodology, effectively. And it follows a path. Maybe, can we read that? It's not great. Let's see. Thank you. Is that better? Okay. So it starts with empathy work. Sort of the crux of design thinking is, ooh, yay, thank you, colors. Excellent. The idea is that we often go into problem solving thinking of ourselves as this is the problem that we need to solve. And design thinking takes a step back, and you actually start, instead of with problem solving, you start with problem finding. And so we often go into situations thinking we know what the problem is, and then it turns out once we get deeper into it, we didn't actually know what the original problem was, so the solution that we designed wasn't actually helpful. So design thinking starts with empathy work, which is effectively talking to your end user and getting information from them that will help you in the design process, designing your solution, whatever it is. After your empathy work, you're able to define what your problem is. So this is the problem finding part. And then actually, because I'm going colors, I'll go colors all the way. So after define, so we define what is our problem statement, and then we ideate. And ideate is the fancy word for brainstorm, but there's a very specific way to brainstorm and not to brainstorm, and the way that we often brainstorm is counterproductive. So we'll talk about what true ideation / brainstorming looks like today. After ideating, coming up with a bajillion ideas, you focus in on one at a time and you prototype. Prototype is a way of building a solution with like very cheap materials and testing it out. So testing is the last phase. Sorry, I had to get redundant with one of my colors here. Okay, so then you test with the end user, and then at that point, this is a very iterative process. So maybe very rarely will you test and it's going to be perfect, and then you'll just create that product. So usually you'll test, you'll get user feedback. Maybe you didn't solve the problem at all, or maybe the end user tries it and they say, this isn't really solving the problem that we have. And so then you maybe go all the way back to the empathy phase and you go through the entire process again. More often than that, though, there's some tweaks and user feedback that you get, so then you go back to prototyping. But really the point is you can go from the testing phase back to any of these phases, and so it's very much non-linear as a process. So that's what design thinking is, just sort of academic overview. If you're a slightly more visual person, I often like to think of it as like a series of convergent and divergent waves like this. So you enter here, Empathy work is big ideas. You're gathering a lot of information, so you have a big space. And then you have this convergent point. This is where you really hone in and define what is your problem statement. So you've gathered all of this information, all of these data, and then you hone in what is a specific problem that you're solving, and then you zoom back out and you ideate. You come up with a ton of ideas. You do not limit yourself in this phase, and then you, once you've had a bajillion ideas, you focus back in and decide one to prototype. And then you go out and you get a bunch of data again in your testing phase. So the shape sort of at any point, and then I guess hypothetically, if we wanted to close this off, this would be your final product. So that's what design thinking looks like from a more visual perspective. So we're just going to jump right in because my professional development and teaching philosophies are that the best way to learn anything is to do it. And so what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to time box us really strictly. So I want you to find a person that you can talk to. We're talking about today class observation. And so the first thing we're going to do, one person is going to interview person B and ask them, tell me about the last time you observed a class. So just maybe write that question down. So tell me, just so you don't forget it. Something nice and open-ended. Tell me about the last time you observed a class. And you're going to have 2.5 minutes for this quote-unquote interview. The person's going to talk to you. And I encourage you, as you're sharing your experiences observing classes and also being observed, which we'll do the flip side of it after this, as you're telling a story, I like to quote Lewis Carroll here. So there's a quote from Alice in Wonderland that goes, begin at the beginning and go until you reach the end, then stop. So when you're telling stories, that's a good philosophy. Like, go from the very beginning of, and by the way, I should have said this earlier, just as kind of a disclaimer. I have observed classes. I obviously am a member of the PLC, but I am facilitating today, so I'm not going to be a participant. So just wanted to put that out there. But as you're telling this, or as you're telling your story, start from the very moment that you signed up to observe the person's class that you observed and what that was like. And then what was it, what resources did you have going into the person's class to observe? And once you were there, what what were you looking for? How did you know what to look for? Afterwards, did you have follow-up? Was there like a streamlined way to reach out to the person and ask them to grab coffee so that you could give them feedback? Go, literally, begin at the beginning, when you get to the end, stop. So tell the whole story, and if you're being interviewed, go into as much detail as you can. If you're doing the interviewing, find pain points, like jot down things that you're hearing from the person. You're like, ooh, that was a difficulty for them in this process. Find things that you're curious about. When they say something, don't just say, oh yeah, totally, I've had that experience too, because the reason that you've had that experience might be different than the reason that they've had that experience. And so the thing at that point is to say, can you tell me more about this? Why did you feel that way? And so ask why. There's a rule where you ask why sometimes, like an obnoxious child, but it's so true because that's when you really get to the core of an issue, if you keep asking why, like, can you tell me more about this? Can you describe that? Why did you feel that way? And you'll get to some really interesting takeaways. And when you dig in this empathy work, we'll come out the other side with a problem that we can define and that we want to solve. So what we're going to do, it's going to look like this. Let me just write it out. So okay, 2.5 minutes. I will cut you off. I will be a jerk about it and say stop. So person A interviews person B. Oops, person A, sorry. Interviews person B. Also, I'm talking at 1.5 speed today because this is a very short amount of time to be doing this. Okay, and then we're going to swap. So this is 2 minutes times 2 because then person B is going to turn around and interview person A. And then we're going to come back into a large group and we're going to share out interesting things that we found. We're going to share out things that were pain points that came up in our conversations. We're going to share out things that were interesting, things that we didn't expect. Like, oh, totally hadn't thought about that before, or didn't expect to hear this person say this. Those are the types of things that we're going to come back and share out as a group. Does everyone have a partner or two partners if the numbers crunch that way? did not finish that sentence. So one thing about design thinking is it is by design quick and iterative, and you often walk away with the feeling of like, oh, but I wasn't done. Also, design thinking, there's a bias towards action. We as intellectuals and academics like to hear ourselves talk. We love to hear each other talk, and we love to talk. And a lot of times talking is to the detriment of acting. And so it's important in design thinking to say, okay, we got some information, now let's run with it and see what we can do with it. So I'm cutting you off there. I'm asking you to swap. Please swap and do storytelling from the other perspective. So you're now asking the other person about their last time observing a class. 2.5 minutes, ready, go. Your words, they're still going. All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to share out. I'm actually going to time us for this as well. Again, time boxing is super helpful. It makes us be fast and creative. So I'm going to give us 5 minutes, and we'll see where that goes. We might not need 5 minutes, but we have at least 5 minutes to share out. I've done my best at imitating emojis and done rather horribly, but so we're going to share out pain points that came up in our conversations. So those are things that were challenging for the person that you talked to, or like interesting things that they commented on that you hadn't thought about before, or whatever. I'm calling those interesting moments. Okay, who would like to share? Yes.
Lecture halls suck.
Okay. Lecture halls suck. Would that be a pain point or a interesting? Okay.
We noticed that the instructor could not maneuver through the classroom effectively and could not rearrange students.
Okay, so with regards to rearranging students, one thing that you can do if it doesn't feel too hipster is when someone says something that you agree with or that also came up, it's helpful to snap so that you can see like how recurring these feelings are. And maneuvering, words that are hard to spell. Is that right? All right, whatever. Good enough with some vowels in there. All right, what else?
Yeah, okay, along the same lines, instead of observing a traditional lecture, it should be an activity-based opportunity to see how they interact with students, how students interact with them, how we teach on the fly, etc. So. Okay, so observing activities greater than lecture. Yeah? Okay. Snaps? You don't have to. And don't if it didn't come up, but it's just like a good way to gauge what came up. Yeah.
Pain point. When I was listening to Mr. Collins, he was sharing that he was observing in the class that this person was trying to teach the lesson, but never really hooked the students, at the beginning. Like this is explained why it didn't explain the objective or any relevance to the content that was being tried to deliver. Right?
Yeah, he was moving to a more active style, but he never explained to the students what he was doing, why they were doing it, what their expectations of them were, what the expectations of him is. So he never sold it.
Okay.
So my pain, the pain that I felt was that I was like, I remember being in that class where I was like completely lost, and I was trying to think like, man, is it me or is it the person in front of me like crazy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just confused, anxiety, stressed out. That's kind of what I started feeling.
Okay, as a facilitator, I am going to put a star next to this one because I think that is a very interesting point that might be part of a different question. So if we were finding pain points and figuring out how to redesign the teaching experience, then that would be very relevant and in terms of how we want to restructure our classrooms and the way that we present content. Otherwise, you could convince me why this is part of the actual observing. Yeah, Jim.
Because when I observed the class, it was pretty clear to me that had not happened, even though he hadn't said that had not happened.
Right.
So to me, it was a reason why the students weren't engaged and were actually, seemed to me, a little hostile to the situation. Okay. So I think it came out of, it raised for me a question, and that was the answer.
Maybe want to speak to the environment, observe. Yeah, negative. Lack of engagement is a subcategory of this.
One of the things is students want to know what you want them to do. What do you want me to do? And so if you don't tell them what you want them to do, really, then they're not going to do it. They can't. They get confused. They blame you, or they blame themselves, or each other, or something else.
Okay, great. Sounds good. What else came up?
Can we add to like what you?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's important to write the word down that Jim said, not Mr. Collins, but Jim.
Thank you.
What Jim said.
I feel wakeful.
But he used the word hostile. That seems important.
Mm-hmm.
Put out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was a lot of feeling.
Sorry. Feel free to talk too. I can hear even behind my back.
Then I have something in the interesting category.
Yes.
So in my interview, he shared that during his observation time, he used the word fun. He said that the class was fun, had a fun atmosphere, and that he observed a couple of very interesting and effective techniques. And my response to what he shared was, "Ooh, I like that. I'm going to try that."
Okay. So some fun and a learning experience. Okay, those are 5 minutes. Cool. So now, no, you're good. You could have. I give you permission. I give consent. Okay, so we're gonna do a similar exercise now. I want you to switch partners, just so you can talk to someone new and have a fresh perspective. So if you need to get up and move, you can do that. Otherwise, you can turn the person on the other side of you. So you're going to answer this question this time. All right, thank you. Now we're gonna swap and do 2.5 minutes the other direction. Ready, set, go. I'm cutting you off mid-sentence. Okay, like I said, we're time boxing and I'm being strict about it. Also, we have like not very much time. So, what came up? Pain points, interesting points from that conversation just now. Yeah.
One of the interesting things we were talking about, or Rosamund brought up, and we were talking about, is the extent to which your relationship with the person you're observing affects what's, like, how it's being observed and how it's talked about.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to shorthand that as relationship matters, and we'll remember what it means. Okay, Valerie.
Mr. Collins, I mean James. I did want to have a point, like if you're in an activity-based class, I mean you're doing some activity, this is a great thing to have the observer participate in the activity and not be out and looking. So I thought it was a great idea because then that kind of making you understand more what you're trying to do. Kind of the discussion we had before about explaining what you're trying to achieve to students.
Because so much of the value coming out of an activity-based classroom is the relationship among the students, and you don't really see that unless you join it. And so it was really a good thing to do.
Great, thank you. I forgot to set our timer, so I'm going to set it now.
I heard something really interesting that okay, so they were using iClicker and it got too expensive, which a lot of times when you get talked into all this technology, I just had to struggle with the publisher and thought, they're just charging so much. Anyway, so then just old school, still checking in with students. What do you think about this? What do you know about this? So just different, really interesting ways to engage students. Using something that you can go back to caveman day, like if you think this, 1, if you think this, 2, if you think this, 3, just to check for understanding. I thought that was really interesting. Like, oh yeah, we'll always have thinkers. And then there was other steps to engage students as well that I thought was really interesting. So that I hadn't thought of in a while. Yeah, just different ways, just different techniques to get people involved, get students involved in the learning.
Okay, so I'm gonna broaden that out. That observation is an opportunity to rethink the tools that you use. Okay. Okay. What else?
Observing instruction is not necessarily observing the instructor. In that, when the students are the primary speakers during the observation, it is showing you the instruction that has occurred and the quality and knowledge level, etc.
Okay. Very deep. I love it, yeah.
So actually, this is something that when I was telling about it, I was remembering it for the first time, was that when I was observed, I felt like my students put on an extra good show. So maybe that's also relationship matters. So with students, like it was all student-based activities, and they got really into it, and they they were enthusiastic, more enthusiastic than normal. I was like, thanks guys.
Observation about that. I think they owned it more. I think the students had more pride in the work because it was part of. They owned it, right?
Because they were on stage.
Yeah, they're the ones who were moving it forward.
Yeah.
So of course they had more pride in it.
So that's almost interesting. I feel like that could go in both categories in a sense, that students are less engaged without an audience, to put it kind of crudely, I guess. But also that observation can inspire student engagement, I guess. Does that feel right?
Well, I think maybe they were having my back.
Yeah.
Oh, so your students love you. Okay.
Yeah.
If your students didn't like you, it would have been different.
Yeah.
They like you.
It was for me, I was like, oh, you guys are awesome.
Okay. So how your students act,
In front of others.
yeah, act in public, I'll call it, right? Yeah, it can be an indicator of how they feel about you. Okay, that's very interesting.
So I have one that may go on in both categories as well. So in speaking with Donna, my interviewee, she shared that so she was talking about the 300, 108, right? So the co-rec course, the 300 meets first, the 108. And based on what had happened in the 300, she had to go on the fly and switch the lesson plan up and let it just develop organically. So the pain point is she wondered if the faculty member who had observed her thought, what the heck's happening, right? Right, and so she wondered about that. So that was a bit painful for her. But on the interesting side, the person who observed her said, wow, your class is really fun and the students really seem to have fun. So that organic decision, right, actually fleshed out very positively.
All right, great. I'm writing the pain point as observer might not fully understand what's going on backstage, quote unquote. Will you stop that? Thanks. All right, but then on the flip side of that, it's kind of maybe when you switch things up and it's unexplained, it's kind of improvisational in a way. So I'm going to say improv is fun. So that's my bias. Improv is fun.
Can I just add to that? A lot of it is like there was the structure that was going to be in the class they observed was out the window. So it's like there was nothing really to see. Like I was worried that they had wasted their time. Like they wasted their time by being there because there wasn't anything to see or watch. Just me working one-on-one with the students as they were working on drafts. So that was like the main thing. But
yeah,
I guess it was something.
Which kind of comes into this category again. Of that, we have perhaps worry as like the person in the spotlight, that the person observing us might not fully understand what's going on backstage, and they may not have that context. Okay, I'm going to stop us there, just for time boxing and keeping us honest. I actually want to come back really quickly to your previous comments, Jim, and do a yes and of them. So yes and is like a classic improv exercise. You might be familiar with it. You take somebody's idea or thought and you say yes to it, and then you say and you build on it, and that is like the whole crux of what improv is. And basically, I want to recognize that this is something that was observed and say that basically, maybe was there a deeper problem in the context of observation? Did you feel that there was a way to address that? I'm not sure whose comment this was, maybe Martine, but was there a way then subsequently to address that with the instructor? Because that's how we can bring it back to the observation piece. In observation, in observing each other and helping each other grow, if we notice something like this in the classroom, is there a way to give that feedback and help that person grow as a professor? Does that make sense? So that's how the question comes back.
Just a personal conversation with the professor, pointing that out to them, actually having them come to that conclusion rather than me kind of guiding them to that perspective. Mm-hmm. They went back that week and spent some time on that, and they felt it was real positive. The students seemed to respond so well. So that immediate improvement, as he described it. I think when he sold him on the idea that, yeah, I do need to sell this because I am trying to do something new and the students aren't used to it. So, I've got to spend some time on that.
Right. Yeah. One thing, if I break my role as a facilitator a little bit and step more into my role as a PLC member, just one thing that I'm going to throw out to the group at large is that some things need to be scaffolded really well. The person you're observing, you may or may not know the person you're observing. You may or may not have a personal relationship with them. You may or may not feel comfortable reaching out to them and giving critique or criticism if you don't know that person very well. And so I think as a PLC, it could be really helpful to have a process that is conducive at every step to making sure that people understand the ways in which to communicate the feedback mechanisms and whatnot. Because not everyone perhaps would reach out proactively and say, hey, I'd love to meet with you and give you, positive and constructive criticism, positive criticism and constructive criticism on the class that I observed. Okay, stepping back into my role as facilitator. So basically, this was a little scale model of empathy work. Normally, empathy work takes place over, if you're solving like a real problem, building a real product, whatever it is, empathy work often takes place over the course of months. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of checking in, there's a lot of various ways of communicating. So again, scale model, it was cute. And we're gonna go to the next phase, which is what is a problem that surfaced that we're interested in, that is sort of piquing our curiosity, that you're seeing. It can either be from the observer side or the observee side that you kind of want to dig into, define as our problem statement, and ideate around. Is there anything here that is of particular interest to people that sticks out? Martine?
Maybe a challenge, I think, was the relationship.
Okay.
The relationship between person being observed, observer, vice versa. That is not positive. It's not the trust. Are we really giving the best critique to that person, or are we receiving the best critique?
So let's, if we were to turn that into a how might we statement, how might we do that? So how might we, how do we want to structure that as a statement? Like for example, improve relationships between observers and observees. That's just an example, but I won't throw that out.
Observers with observees.
Okay, how might we, okay, sure, match observers ease. Okay, any other variations on that?
Can we say something like how can we improve the quality of the feedback by having the best match between the observer and the observee? I'm just adding to that.
Okay.
Because I feel like the goal is improving the quality of the feedback they're receiving or we're giving.
I might go even further back than those. How might we build trust? Right? Because we all, as we all know, critique is both seemingly positive and seemingly negative, so you have to be able to trust that person who's observing. I think that's really important.
Okay. This is a very interesting moment that I just want to press pause on the timer and take a step back from. This is why we problem find. We don't necessarily just dive in thinking we know what the problem is. When I arrived today, one of the things that we were potentially going to focus on was the actual sheet of paper that you take into someone's class when you're observing them, and how that specific sheet of paper could be improved. But maybe the deeper problem that is coming up in the context of these discussions is that we don't know each other personally well enough to really have like a strong and trusting relationship in order to provide high quality feedback and know how to communicate with each other effectively. So if this is the problem that we're solving, that's very different than changing what a sheet of paper says, right? And so that's why we do this, yeah.
Kind of a meta question to this would be, in say like this semester and last semester, were people being like attached randomly to people, or was it people's choice? Did you choose who you wanted to observe? Because I guess if you choose who you want to observe, then you're more likely to maybe choose somebody who you admire and you want to check out their class.
Sure.
And to add on to that, what's the purpose of the observation? Because we could look at the observation if you want to use it as an opportunity to build a relationship and trust between two people who didn't have that before, then that's obviously a different conversation as well, or a different, problem to solve.
So how might we use the observation process in trust building? Oops, that's not words. Trust building, right? There's also an open-ended question just about basically how it is chosen. Like, do we choose, because we signed up to observe the class that we wanted to, but is that necessarily, this is not a rhetorical question, this is a real question, not to be discussed right now, but is that necessarily the best way? Are you going to sign up for a person that perhaps you've never seen before and you want to learn from and you want to get to know them? Or are you going to sign up for someone that you know really well already and you know their teaching style? And what are the pros and cons to either side? So what's sort of coming up is there's a big theme of trust. There's a big theme of the sign-up process, I guess.
Can we just clarify it as the process?
Yes, and I will write that on the board. Yeah, the process from beginning to the end. What other big themes are coming up? I guess the thing with the process is I do kind of want to break it down because the sign-up part of the process is different than the feedback part of the process. Is different than the actual observing part of the process, and
within the process, you could create an opportunity
to build trust before the observation.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So I think the process also includes the skills of observation. So I think that understanding how to observe. We can all see, but can we observe? Those are two different things. So I think we should spend some time not only on the process, but skill building, and there are models out there to do that. So building skill, observation skills.
Yeah, perhaps the sheet, the observation
can help with that.
Could fall under that
prompt.
Okay, so we are technically out of time. I'm going to generously give myself 4 more minutes because is that okay? We started 15 minutes late. Yeah, is that okay? I don't want to. I respect everyone's time, but I do want to reel us back in. Basically, what we've seen is that there are a lot of sub problems within the overarching genre that we chose today. So I guess my main question is, so we have experienced a micro version of empathy work. We have figured out some of the problems, so we've defined some problem statements. What we need to do now is we need to pick a problem statement that we want to move forward with and ideate on. And we're going to do the tiniest version of this in 3 minutes. And then we're going to move forward and actually prototype like something that we're excited about in the actual classroom. So what specifically here are we excited about that we want to ideate around? Like, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Building trust.
Building trust? Okay, cool. Cool. So there's no right or wrong answer. These are all problems that we have found and problems that we could come back to with the design process. Literally, I could just do this all day, every day. I love doing this. But we don't have all day, every day. So we're going to focus in on one right now, which is building trust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us 1 minute, quite literally, to throw out as many ideas that we sort of deem in our heads, we're value judging them as like good ideas, like how you build trust between people. So ready, go.
Meet before the observation.
All right. And this is just general building trust. You don't have to think about it in the observation process. So meet the person. Meeting people helps you build trust. All right, what else?
After meet the person, add a long introduction.
Okay. What else?
/ educational journey.
Help me buy you lunch.
What did you do?
Buy lunch.
Buy them lunch? Okay.
Them by you.
Boy, next week.
Truly, don't limit yourselves to thinking about this in the context of educators, in the context of this group, in the context of anything. Like, how do two people build trust?
How about don't meet the person and have coffee for the purpose of building trust? That's weird.
Okay, so don't explicitly aim
Share
to build
trauma.
trust. Okay.
Vulnerability, I guess it was
Oh my gosh, why not write this word? Trust. All right. Vulnerability
Share traumas.
/ trauma sharing. Okay.
Well, not sharing traumas. Not
Like-
telling you
like-
about trauma when we actually share the trauma.
Oh, yeah.
Like experiencing trauma together?
No.
Okay.
Can escape.
escape room.
Scare park.
I don't want to do observational then, so
That's on.
All right.
Find
What else?
something in common.
Okay, yeah, find commonalities.
Yeah, we don't want to share an observation with a tubby.
Hey, I'm all about it. Okay, my timer didn't go off, but I'm going to stop us there. So next we're going to do 1 minute. Come up with as many terrible ideas as you can for building trust. I want you to actively brainstorm bad ideas.
Trust building exercises. Terrible.
With a mean face.
Assumptions,
Mean face.
right?
Okay, make lots of assumptions. Cool, what else?
Schedule a meeting to build trust.
Not
Okay.
listening. Active listening.
Not active.
No active, right?
Not active.
Not active listening. So yeah, I just threw the word out there.
Okay, non-active listening?
Yeah, non-active listening.
Should that say not overbuild trust? Or
What? Oh, yeah, I mean, sorry, I was meaning, so these are bad ideas for building trust.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually, yeah, that's a good clarification. I'm not asking you to come up with ideas that don't build trust. I'm asking you to come up with terrible ideas for building trust. I know it's kind of a weird line, but throw out ideas that you think are terrible that could hypothetically build trust.
Stop them on Facebook first. Google them and
Okay, I just heard 2 ideas. I basically heard demean them, and I heard stalk them. Oh, okay.
I think anytime you're using observations to establish some sort of hierarchy of who's the best and who's the worst, where you have these preconceived notions that this observation is going to lead us to a judgment, or, well, I mean, a lot of times what our observations in our departments are, which ends up being, do you get tenure or not? Or do you get hired for the next year if you're an adjunct or not, based on the observation? You can sort of feel like something where you better perform, or there's going to be some sort of larger negative repercussion. So I think
Okay.
Be assigned to somebody as your trust buddy.
Okay.
Trust buddy.
All right, and then I'm gonna cut us off there. So.
I'm gonna add one more, continue to use the sheet as it is.
Okay.
Add one more, lies and lies.
Status quo and lies. Okay, great. So if we had more time for this exercise, one thing that can be really fun is to think from perspectives that are like so drastically different from our own. Like if I were a dog, how do I build trust? If I am the CEO in a room of other CEOs, how do I build trust? If I am like whatever, you can basically role play a lot of different things, including things that are not humans, and a lot of really interesting concepts come up. And the reason we do these exercises is even if ideas feel really silly sometimes, a lot of really positive things can come out of them. Like the idea of cell phones originally seemed like an absurdity and probably went on like a dream big pie in the sky sort of list. But now we're connected across the world. So that's why we do this process. Time, So I guess what I would challenge, if I can be so bold, what I would challenge this group to between now and next time, which is 2 weeks from now, is to pick something here or something there or something else that you come up with as like something that is a trust building opportunity that you want to try out. And try it out with another member of this PLC. And then we'll come back and we'll report on our prototypes. So that is like pretty open-ended. Does anyone have any questions about that? Anything I can clarify? Donna?
Question, you mentioned that earlier the way when we talk about ideating and how the way we normally brainstorm is usually counterproductive. So is what you kind of showed here very, very, very quickly like the better way to brainstorm? Like,
So,
is that what we're seeing?
So this is a part of it, yeah. We get into these mental spaces of when we brainstorm, we can only throw out good ideas. So we're actually, there are full exercises around bad idea brainstorming. And a lot of times it's actually really helpful to do brainstorming exercises that are like unrelated to the task at hand at all. So like, let's come up with as many bad ways as we can to eat ice cream. And then you have like, you just throw out like as many terrible ideas as you can, and it just gets you in the headspace of don't value judge your ideas before they come out. Just get as many ideas out as you can, and then we can go back and value judge them, because something that might have seemed like a bad idea on the surface might have like a gem hidden inside of it. So that's the concept. When we brainstorm, a lot of the times people, they'll censor themselves. It's like, oh, I'm only gonna throw out ideas that I deem good enough to throw out. So yeah, a lot of this work is about just shutting off our inner sensors. And the other thing that a lot of people do is they get very attached to their first idea. So you might throw out an idea in the brainstorming process and get so like married to it that you will never separate from it. And one of the like core tenets or principles of design thinking is that your first idea is almost never your best. And so it's just an exercise in detachment from judgment, in a detachment from ideas, in an embracing of other people's ideas, in taking an idea that is terrible and building on it and seeing where it goes. So a lot of this is just really like sort of mental restructuring how we think. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. Sorry it was so fast. I hope that we can all build trust with each other, because this actually sounds like a really fun exercise. And this is building trust is like part of what I do professionally. So yay. All right, thank you.